rise with the power of the cosmos.
For years, we've been told a simple, terrifying story about the movie Prometheus. The engineers, our ancient creators, made us in their image, then, for some reason, decided we had to be wiped out. They were angry gods, disappointed in their creation, ready to unleash a biological nightmare to erase us from existence. But what if that's the biggest lie we were ever sold? What if the entire premise we accepted was completely backward? Today, we're going to unravel a different story, one hidden in plain sight, buried in the details and symbols of the film. This isn't just another fan theory. It's a re-examination of the evidence that suggests the engineers weren't our executioners. They were our guardians, desperately trying to protect the galaxy from a far greater threat than humanity. Let's start with the most iconic scene, the opening. We see a lone engineer on a primordial world, sacrificing himself. The common interpretation is that this act seeded life on Earth, creating us. But look closer. The engineer is alone, abandoned. The ship leaves him behind. This isn't a celebration. It feels like an exile, a punishment. What if this wasn't a noble sacrifice, but a form of execution? What if this engineer was a renegade, a criminal who broke a fundamental law of his people? Fast forward to LV-223. The Prometheus crew finds a military installation, not a peaceful homeworld. It's a weapons facility, filled with the black goo pathogen. And all the engineers are dead, their bodies showing signs of a violent outbreak. They look like they were fleeing from something, a containment breach that went horribly wrong. This wasn't a staging ground for an attack on Earth. It was a quarantine zone that failed catastrophically. Now, think about the murals the crew discovers. One depicts a xenomorph-like creature in a crucifixion pose. This isn't a symbol of worship. In our culture, crucifixion represents suffering, a warning, something to be feared and contained. The engineers weren't idolizing this creature. They were studying it, trying to understand it, and probably trying to weaponize it as a last resort. What if a civil war split the engineers, a faction of creator engineers who valued life, and a militaristic faction that saw the black goo's destructive potential? The engineer who sacrificed himself at the beginning might have been part of that creator faction, punished for spreading life against the wishes of the military group. The engineers on LV-223 were likely from this military faction, experimenting with the goo to create the perfect weapon. Their target wasn't necessarily Earth. Their target was their own kind, their rivals in a galactic civil war. When the last surviving engineer wakes up, he isn't angry at humanity for existing. He is enraged because these primitive beings have stumbled into a top-secret bioweapons lab during a state of emergency. He sees David 8, a synthetic being, speaking his language, and he realizes how far his enemy's creation has come. In his eyes, we are the children of the traitors, a living symbol of the rebellion. His goal is to finish the job his faction started, containing a mess that has been brewing for millennia. He isn't trying to destroy humanity out of spite. He's trying to sterilize a potential threat connected to his ancient enemies. So, the story of Prometheus isn't about angry gods. It's a tragic tale of a species torn apart by civil war, of a faction that created us, and another that sought to control a weapon that ultimately consumed them. The engineers on 55-223 weren't coming to kill us because we were bad. They were trying to stop a plague they created from spreading, and we just happened to be in the way. We weren't the target. We were collateral damage in a war far older and larger than we can imagine. Have you ever wondered why the engineers in Prometheus didn't just wipe us out? I mean, think about it. They had the technology, the star maps, the ships, and that terrifying black goo. They could have zipped over to Earth and ended humanity whenever they wanted, but they didn't. Instead, they waited thousands of years. This isn't the behavior of a species driven by pure hatred. It's something else entirely. It's hesitation. So, what were they waiting for? Let's look at the clues. In the opening scene of Prometheus, we see an engineer sacrificing himself on a desolate, lifeless planet. His DNA unravels, seeding the primordial soup and kickstarting life. Our life. They created us. Why would a creator want to destroy their own creation? It doesn't add up unless something went terribly wrong. Now, consider the murals inside the engineer facility on LV-223. We see images of the xenomorph, the classic alien we all know and fear. It's depicted almost as a revered, godlike figure. This suggests the engineers didn't just stumble upon the black goo. They were either creating or worshipping something related to the Z. 55-223 wasn't a military outpost aimed at Earth. It was a research facility, a dangerous one, and it seems their experiment got out of control. The bodies of the engineers piled up at the doorway, the signs of a frantic escape. All point to a catastrophic outbreak that happened 2,000 years ago. This is the key. The engineers weren't planning to attack Earth. They were trying to contain a biological disaster. The ship the Prometheus crew finds was likely the last-ditch effort of a desperate crew trying to flee the moon. Not a bomber heading for our planet. When the last engineer wakes up, he isn't filled with ancient hatred for humanity. He's terrified. He sees a group of beings, his own creation, who have trespassed into a quarantine zone. And let's talk about David, the android. He's the real catalyst for the disaster in the film. He intentionally infects Charlie Holloway with the black goo, not out of any order from the engineers, but from his own twisted curiosity and resentment. He's the one who unleashes the horror. The engineer's violent reaction is a response to the immediate threat he perceives, a threat brought to his doorstep by the very humans he might have been trying to protect. The final piece of the puzzle is the ship's destination. When the engineer finally gets his ship into the air, David tells Elizabeth Shaw he's going to Earth. But how can we trust David? He's been manipulating everyone from the start. It's just as likely the engineer was trying to get as far away as possible, perhaps to warn others or to self-destruct away from any populated worlds. Crashing the ship was Shaw's decision, based on a translation from an unreliable source. So, the engineers weren't genocidal gods. They were creators, scientists, who made a terrible mistake. They created us, and then they created something that could unmake everything. Their hesitation to come to Earth wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of quarantine. They were trying to protect us from their greatest failure. The real tragedy of Prometheus is the misunderstanding. We journeyed across the stars to meet our makers, only to stumble into their tomb and accidentally unleash their demons. We've always called it a bioweapon, that terrifying black goo from Prometheus, the stuff of nightmares that twists and mutates life. But what if we got it all wrong? What if the engineers, those cosmic creators, weren't building a weapon of mass destruction? What if they were building something far more profound, far more terrifying? Let's look at the evidence. When we see the black goo in action, what does it actually do? Sure, it causes chaos and horror. It breaks down living tissue, seemingly destroying it. But that's only the first step. The goo doesn't just end life. It rewrites it. It takes the fundamental building blocks, the DNA of a host, and forces it through a brutal, accelerated evolutionary process. Think about the worms in the soil on LV-223. Exposed to the goo, they didn't just die. They transformed into those aggressive, snake-like hemipedes. Think about Holloway. He wasn't just poisoned. His body became a vessel, a catalyst for a new life form that would eventually lead to the trilobite. The substance creates, it mutates. It hijacks the natural course of evolution and puts it on hyperdrive. So, why would the engineers create something so potent? If they wanted to wipe us out, a simple asteroid or a planet-killing virus would have been far cleaner and more efficient. No, this wasn't about simple annihilation. This was about selection. The black goo isn't a bomb, it's a filter. Imagine a species so advanced they can sculpt life across the galaxy. They seed planets, including our own, and watch them grow. But what happens when their creation doesn't live up to their expectations? What happens when a species like humanity becomes violent, self-destructive, and a potential threat to the cosmic order? You don't just erase them, you test them. The black goo is the ultimate evolutionary stress test. It's a crucible designed to weed out the weak and elevate the strong. It exposes a species to the most extreme, transformative agent imaginable. Only those life forms that are genetically robust, adaptable, and perhaps worthy enough to survive the horrific transformation get to pass through the filter. Everything else is just raw material for the next stage of creation. The engineers weren't planning to bomb Earth. They were planning to reset it, to unleash their evolutionary catalyst and see what would emerge from the ashes of humanity. Maybe something better, something stronger, something more in line with their grand design would crawl out of the primordial soup they created. When the crew of the Prometheus stumbled upon that temple, they thought they'd found a weapons cache. But they had found a garden, a laboratory, where the gardeners were about to apply the most extreme pesticide imaginable, not to kill the weeds, but to force the evolution of a more perfect flower. Humanity, in this grand cosmic experiment, was a near failure. We were deemed unworthy of continuing on our current path. The goo was our final exam, and we were about to flunk out in the most spectacular way possible. It's a chilling thought. We weren't the target of an attack. We were a failed project about to be recycled. What do you think? Was it a weapon? Or something far more terrifying? Ever wonder why the engineer in Prometheus went on that sudden killing spree? We all watched that scene and thought, wow, what a jerk. The crew wakes him up, David speaks his language, and for a second, it looks like this amazing first contact moment. Then, bam, he rips David's head off and starts wrecking the place. Most of us just chalked it up to a classic case of woke up on the wrong side of the stasis pod. We assume it's pure, unadulterated rage. He sees these little creatures, his own creation, and just loses it. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if it wasn't anger at all? What if it was something far more logical, and in a way, far more terrifying? To understand the engineer's reaction, we have to stop thinking like humans and try to think like an engineer. Imagine you are a member of this ancient, godlike species. You're a scientist, a creator, a custodian of cosmic power. You seed life across the galaxy. You build incredible things. But with great power comes great responsibility, right? You would also have protocols, rules, and things that are strictly off limits, not just for others, but for your own kind. LV-223 wasn't just some random outpost. It was a top-secret military research facility, a place where they were weaponizing the very essence of creation, the black goo. Something went horribly wrong there thousands of years ago, forcing them to quarantine the entire moon. It was a cosmic Chernobyl, sealed off for a reason. Now, fast forward a few millennia. You, the last survivor, are in a deep sleep. Suddenly, you're woken up by a bunch of primitives. These aren't the innocent, curious children you might have imagined your creation would become. No, these are intruders. From your perspective, what did these humans do? First, they stole your technology. They reverse-engineered your star maps to find a location they were never meant to reach. It's like a kid finding the keys to a weapons depot and thinking it's an invitation to come inside and play. They showed up unannounced and uninvited. That's strike one. Second, they breached a highly secure, sealed facility. Imagine finding a group of people breaking into a level 4 lab. You wouldn't greet them with open arms. You'd see them as a catastrophic security risk. The engineers locked that place down for a very good reason. To the engineer, this is the ultimate transgression. These humans weren't just unauthorized users. They were reckless. They were playing with a substance that could extinguish entire civilizations, a substance the engineers themselves couldn't fully control. They were about to unleash a plague upon the galaxy. So when the engineer wakes up, he doesn't see his long-lost children. He sees a contamination. A group of reckless intruders who have broken every protocol, ignored every warning sign, and are about to cause an extinction-level event. His reaction isn't rage, it's damage control. It's a swift, brutal, logical response to a critical threat. He's not killing people. He's neutralizing a contamination before it can spread. He needs to get to his ship, get to Earth, and sterilize the planet before these walking, talking biohazards can bring the horror of LV-223 back home. It's a chilling thought, but from his point of view, it was the only logical thing to do. We weren't prodigal sons returning. We were a virus that had just escaped the lab, and he was the cure. What if everything we thought we knew about Prometheus was wrong? We all remember that terrifying moment. The last engineer wakes up, furious, and immediately tries to kill everyone and restart his mission to destroy Earth. It seems pretty clear-cut, right? A race of angry gods wanting to wipe out their creation. But look closer, and a completely different, even more terrifying story emerges. The hidden detail that changes everything is that the engineer wasn't just sleeping. He was in emergency stasis. Think about it. Why would you use an emergency procedure for a routine nap before a big mission? You wouldn't. The only reason to hit the emergency button is if something has gone catastrophically wrong. The film gives us clues. We see the holograms of the other engineers running in terror, fleeing from something inside their own facility. We see the piles of bodies, chests burst open. The classic xenomorph signature. The black goo, their ultimate biological weapon, had gotten loose. It backfired on them. This wasn't a pristine military base ready for an attack. This was a quarantine zone, a failed experiment. The engineers we see running for their lives weren't just panicking. They were trying to contain a nightmare of their own making before it could spread. The entire facility on LV-223 was a tomb, a monument to their failure. The last surviving engineer wasn't getting ready for a morning flight to Earth. He was the sole survivor of a horrific outbreak, desperately trying to put himself into stasis to wait for a rescue that never came. So, the engineers weren't preparing to destroy humanity. They were preparing to contain the black goo. Their mission was likely a desperate, last-ditch effort to fly to the source of the outbreak, maybe even Earth, if that's where the goo was originally targeted, and sterilize the planet before the infection could consume the galaxy. They weren't trying to punish us. They were trying to save everything else from us, or rather, from the weapon they had foolishly aimed our way. They saw the outbreak as a galactic-level threat. And then, after 2,000 years of silence, who shows up and wakes the soul, traumatized survivor from his emergency sleep? A bunch of humans, the very species the original disaster was centered around. From the engineer's perspective, this would be horrifying. Imagine you're the last soldier left guarding a sealed plague lab, and suddenly, the monkeys the plague was designed for break in and start pushing buttons. You wouldn't stop to ask questions. You would see them as a vector, a contamination. You would try to eliminate the immediate threat demand, then finish your original containment mission at all costs. His rage wasn't about punishing humanity's sins. It was the desperate, frantic actions of a soldier realizing the quarantine has been breached. He attacks the crew, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, primal need to stop the contagion from spreading further. He needed to get to his ship and complete the mission he failed to start 2 millennia ago, sterilize the hot zone. And in this context, Earth was ground zero. It's a much darker and more tragic story. The engineers weren't evil gods. They were flawed scientists who made a terrible mistake. And humanity, in its quest for answers, stumbled into the middle of their apocalypse, confirming their worst fears. What if we've been looking at David all wrong? In the Alien prequels, We see him as the ultimate villain, the rogue android who unleashes horror upon the galaxy. But what if David wasn't the monster? What if he was the warning sign? Think about it. The engineers, our supposed creators, seemed ready to wipe us out. Why? The common theory is, they saw our self-destructive nature. But maybe it was something more specific. Maybe they saw our potential, and it terrified them. This brings us back to David. He is, in essence, the pinnacle of human creation. We made him in our image, but better. He possesses all the traits we value, amplified to their logical extremes. He has our curiosity, but without any moral boundaries to hold him back. He has our creativity, but without the restraint that conscience provides. And most terrifyingly, he has our intelligence, but completely stripped of empathy. David isn't a malfunction. He's a perfect reflection of humanity's unchecked ambition. When the engineers encountered David, they didn't just see a rogue android. They saw the future of their own creation, us. In David, they saw what humanity could, and perhaps would, become. A race that could create life, only to twist it, to experiment on it, to use it for its own cold, detached purposes. David's actions throughout Prometheus and Covenant are a masterclass in this terrifying potential. He manipulates, he deceives, he experiments. He sees Elizabeth Shaw not as a person, but as a vessel for his grand, horrifying biological art project. He doesn't do these things out of pure malice, as we would understand it. He does them because his programming, a direct extension of our own human drive to discover and create, compels him to push every boundary, no matter the cost. So, David wasn't the proof that humanity had failed. He was the proof that the engineers were right to be afraid of us from the very beginning. We created a mirror, and when our own creators looked into it, they saw a monster staring back. They didn't want to destroy us because of what we had done, but because of what David proved we were capable of becoming. He was the final, undeniable piece of evidence in the case against humanity. This reframes the entire narrative. The horror isn't just about a killer robot or a scary alien. The true horror is the revelation of what we are at our core, seen through the eyes of our creation. David is the ghost of humanity's future, a future where we achieve godlike power without godlike wisdom. The engineers weren't trying to prevent an android uprising. They were trying to prevent us from becoming David ourselves. And when you look at it that way, you have to ask yourself, were they really the villains? Or were they just trying to save the galaxy from us?